This is just going to be a quick video updating about the status, strengths, and weaknesses of this instrument. So your piano is a spinet, which means that it has about twice as many moving parts as a normal upright piano. Let's see, I'm going to put this down. So the mechanism of the piano is basically a miniature catapult. You are shooting the hammer at the string and catching and reloading it. You need to be out of the way of the string or it has no room to ring. An ordinary upright piano, the miniature catapult or whippin, is sitting on the opposite end of the key. On your spinet, in order to accommodate the shorter cabinet, the miniature catapult, the whippin, is actually suspended below the key with all these abstracts and elbows, which you can see from under here. So, funny thing about the spinet is you can actually play it from underneath. So this means that something that would be a nice, easy adjustment for an ordinary upright can be a little more intrusive on a spinet. The age of the piano, although I can't find a serial number readily, I'm going to guess based on the fact that there are some steel wound wires. There are many more copper wound wire, but steel wound piano wires were prevalent during World War II. And so I'm guessing that because there's a handful, or literally two, two bicords of copper wound, steel wound, that this instrument was just after World War II, so they still would have had the steel wound strings in stock, but had gone back to copper, which would have been used for bullet casings during the war. As far as the touch response of the piano, this instrument has early let-off. So again, we were talking about the miniature catapult. Let me put this down. So the touch response mechanism is miniature catapult, and you want to have as much possible influence over that range of motion so that when you're hitting it hard, you've got a lot of wind-up time. And then when you're hitting it soft, that you don't have a great distance to cross and you can still accent the wire and get out of the way. That moment of shooting the hammer is called escapement or let-off. And in your piano, let-off is pretty ridiculously early. So you can see that I stop having influence like an inch away from the string. And it's not consistent. That's just an example of one of the worst. What that means for the musician is that you can't really play this piano soft. That you're trying to have some dynamics, and the geometry of the instrument is undermining that. What it means for the tuner is that I can't knock it into tune because I need to deliver maximum force to the speaking length of the wire, or you're going to destabilize it when you're playing. The first piece of the wire that moves is between the pin and this pressure plate, and I could feel it in a pronounced way on this instrument for two reasons. Turning this, and this piece of wire stretches most and first, and then we use that maximum force to the speaking length to draw any latent motion onto the speaking length. And the instrument had, kind of rusted itself into place, so there were many occasions where I had to drop the pitch in order to raise the pitch. Because I could sit here and turn this and none of the motion would make it out into the speaking length. And that is also a reflection of the early let-off because I was unable to use that maximum force to draw tension out onto the speaking length. As far as the pin tension, these are the tuning pins. There's another 2 inches of that driven into the pin block, which we cannot see. The pin block is rock maple, and these are basically finely threaded screws. And the pin tension was actually pretty good. I didn't have any that were worth marking. The season is with us right now because the wood is swollen, so we may in the winter have pins that do not have good tension, but none were on the border for me now. The soundboard of the instrument's in good shape. Oh, bench is very loud. Soundboard of the instrument's in good shape. This is your mid-range bridge running up. This is your bass bridge. The bass bridge actually has some pretty significant fatigue. You can see this crack there, and that follows the pins down for quite a bit. And then there's one. Nope, the bottom ones look okay. See, there's some fatigue on them, but there's not a crack connecting them all. So this is not something we're really going to do something about. There's an audible symptom associated with like a plunkiness in the tone. So the wire is holding the tension, and that tension is transferred by downbearing through the bridge to the soundboard. And when you have cracks or fatigue, then the tension actually goes to close that crack before it goes into the soundboard. And it would be pretty invasive and not cost effective to do for this instrument. It's kind of a crime of passion to rebuild old pianos. If it is a family heirloom, then it is one of a kind, and the cost consideration gets shuffled around a bit. There's no reason not to play when you have this kind of bridge fatigue, but it does change my approach while tuning, and it does change what we can expect out of the instrument. It is also a little bit of a wild card if we decide to correct the let off, if we decide to attempt to get a better let off on this piano, which we don't know if the components will allow us to. There's a likelihood that in the process of trying to adjust them, that some of them break because of the age of the piano. But that's not something we will know until we decide to, if we decide to. When you have fatigue on the bridge and you start changing how much force can get to the wire, you can actually give rise to sympathetic vibrations or buzzing noises that wouldn't otherwise have been there because the wire simply wasn't moving enough to accent the interfering sound. There was, upon arrival, there was a penny stuck underneath this key, so it was raised up. That has been removed. There was an unglued damper on this damper that has been reglued. The audible symptom of that missing was just bleed through, really crazy sympathetic vibrations all through the keyboard. So you'd hit a key and it would just keep ringing because that one wire would sympathize. And then in a technician's first, in this area down here, after removing the fallboard, I found an Easter egg. So that's exciting. It has a bag of Skittles with no expiration date. I have no idea the year, and a quarter in the egg, which is from, I think, 1999. So that's been in there a while. So that was exciting. As far as moving forward on the instrument, it wasn't so terribly out of tune that we need to tune it again in the short term. Sometimes if a piano has sat for prolonged periods between tunings, then you need to tune it 3 weeks after the first tuning because the tension adjusts and kind of torques the components, and it just takes about 3 weeks for that to settle, and then you can do it again. I don't think we're in a position where we need to do a second tuning. So I would say that moving forward with this piano, we should clean underneath the keys. There's a lot of dust and detritus built up. This weird, maybe petals, purple flakes of some kind in there. Cleaning underneath the keys is not terribly expensive or time consuming, and it kind of bribes the piano to behave. And that would be a good first step if we decide that we're going to go after the let-off adjustment. Let-off is adjusted way down here. It's another one of those that in a normal upright, it's like, oh, right in front of your face. But for a spinet, a little harder to access. So if we are going to attempt to get better dynamics on this instrument, then we're going to want to clean under the keys first just to incentivize the piano to behave. If we don't want to, all of that is elective, and if we don't want to do those, that's fine. There's no harm in playing the piano as it is, depending on the level of musicianship. Some of that might actually get in the way. Not having sufficient let-off can really truncate the expressiveness. I got to put the piano back together and touch base with Steve in person. Just been recording these type of videos for people during the pandemic because it's a whole lot of information, and often people like to be able to review it to formulate questions. I had noticed coming into the house that there were, laminated notes on the log piles indicating that the home may be used for like an Airbnb, and you're going to want to put something in your Airbnb contract talking about not putting liquids, drinks on the pianos. I've definitely had to go service instruments that have been damaged, sometimes quite badly, from the Airbnb experience. These decorative pieces on your instrument are particularly vulnerable, so it might be a wise idea As far as the value of the piano, I mean, in a piano shop, this could probably have a $400 price tag on it, and it would really only be used as an upselling device. In private sale, you may get half of that and push up toward that. As an heirloom, it's kind of priceless, but unfortunately, old pianos, unless they're Steinway, do not retain their value because Steinway's still in business and you get paralyzed by parts from these other builders. All right, hopefully that's just the right amount of too much information.